We have learned few of the built-in functions in Python like print, len. Range is one of those built-in function which is used to create immutable sequence of numbers. So whenever we want to create a sequence of numbers, we can use a range function. Syntax of the range function is range parenthesis, and inside that we have three parameters: start, stop, and step. Start is the first number of the sequence. Basically, this is the first number which will be generated by the range function. The value to the start function can be an optional, which means you do not need to provide the start. If we do not provide the start value, the range function by default will consider it as 0. Stop is 1 above the last number of the sequence. Basically, if the maximum number that you want to generate in a range is 1 to 100, then your stop will be 101. This is a compulsory parameter, so you have to provide a value to it. Step is a difference between the numbers in the sequence. Basically, the sequence in which the numbers will be generated, the difference between two consecutive numbers is going to be our step parameter. It is again an optional. If we do not provide it, by default, Python will consider it as 1. So for example, if we want to generate a list of 1 to 99 as a numbers, we can use range function which will have 1 as a start, 100 at stop, and 1 as a step. So let's see few of the examples of the range function and how can we use it in our programs. So let's create a variable result equal to range, and to this we are going to pass only 10. Now let's print this result. Let's see the output of our program. Let's run our program, python ex1.py, and here it outputs range 0, 10. So we just passed 10 to the range function and gave that function's output to the variable result, and we tried to print that result. But instead of printing that range, it prints the object. Basically, this is a range object that it has given, and as per the syntax, we are just passing the stop. Basically, the 10 is given to the stop parameter, and by default, start is considered as 0, and step will be considered as 1. Now, let's see how can we actually get these numbers. So the range function will generate a sequence of numbers which are immutable, but those numbers we can get only if we convert them to one of the data structures that we have learned, like list. So let's first convert this result into a list. So I create result underscore list equal to list and pass result to it. Now let's print this result underscore list. Let's see the output of our program. Python ex1.py, and here we can see that it gives us a list of numbers starting with 0 up to 9. We passed 10 in it, but we get numbers from 0 to 9. So basically 1 less than the number that we have provided. So range function by default considers start as 0 and step as 1, and it has generated a sequence of number from 0 to 9, which is 1 less than the stop parameter value, which is 10 that we have passed. Let's create another sequence of numbers which starts with 1 and up to 10. So here we can say result underscore list equal to list, and inside that we can pass range starting with 1 up to 10. Now let's print this result underscore list. Let's run our program, python ex1.py, and here we can see that the second list that we generated starts with 1 and continues up to 9. Now here when we used an range function, we actually passed 1 and 10, which means we have passed a start which is 1 and stop which is 10. We never passed the step. So by default it is considered as 1. Now let's create another list where we pass a step as 2. Result underscore list equal to list range 1 comma 10 comma 2, and let's print the result. Let's see the output of our program. Python ex1.py, and here we can see that we passed 1 as a starting element up to 10 and step is 2. Hence it has considered 1, after that plus 2, that means 3, then plus 2 which is 5, plus 2 7, plus 2 9, and after that when you do plus 2 it goes beyond 10, and hence the only list that we have got is 1 to 9, excluding all the even numbers. You will frequently use a range function with the for loop like this. Let's say for I in range, let's say I pass 10, print I. Let's run our program and see the output. Python ex1.py, and here we can see that the for loop has printed those numbers generated by the range function one after the other. So here for loop gets a range of numbers, basically the sequence of numbers from the range function, which is given one number at a time to the I variable, which is nothing but our iteration variable, and then we are using that inside a for loop. So we can use a range function along with the for loop when we know the exact number of times that we want the iteration to be conducted. So let's see one of the practical examples of the using for loop with a range function. Here we have a list of names, all of them having small case letters in them. We want this list to be modified in such a way that each number has first letter or a first character to be capitalized. For this we can use the title method on strings, but since this is a list we have to actually loop through this list and then convert or change each of the element of this list. So for that we can use a range function like this. For index in range len of names. So the len function will actually give length of the list names, which is nothing but 6, and the range function will consider that 6 as the stop parameter value. Hence it will by default start with 0th index and continue up to 5, not including the 6. Names index equal to names index dot title. So here we can see that since index is going to have numbers from 0 to 5, we can actually access each and every element of the list names using that index as an index value for the list elements, and then we are going to convert that into the title case. Now let's print this names list. Let's say names, and let's put one more print statement here just for seeing the differences. Now let's see the output of this program. Let's run our program ex2.py, and here we can see that our earlier list was having all the names in the small case, and then we converted every name into a title case. So we can use range function this way. Let's see another example where we will try to get a list of numbers from 1 to 100 which are even. So let's create an empty list. So let's say even underscore numbers equal to an empty list. Then we will use for loop for number in range. So we want to get numbers from 1 to 100 including 100 and all the even numbers. So we can say 1 comma 101. Now since we want all the even numbers, that means we want number which are divisible by 2. So for that we'll put if number modulo 2 is equal to 0. That means the remainder of the equation when we divide a number by 2 should be 0, then and then only it will be an even number. Then we say even numbers dot append, since we are going to add the elements into the empty list, number. So if it is an even number, then only it will get added. Now let's print the even number list. Let's see the output of this program. Let's run our program ex3.py, and here we can see that we got a list of numbers starting with 0 up to 100 including 100, and all the numbers are the even numbers. So from this it's clear that we can use range function whenever we want to create or modify a list. So range function should be used whenever you know that the number of iteration needs to be up to a certain value, or it can be derived from some other object.